My name's Evie, and if you ask anyone in my family, they'll tell you I've been the weak one since birth. Too quiet, too soft, too bookish, too wrong. In their eyes. My father especially loved to turn me into the family joke. I can still hear his voice echoing in my head at every holiday, every birthday dinner. Evie couldn't even carry groceries without dropping them. She runs slower than a snail. What's she gonna do in life? Write poetry? Play soldier with her toy guns? Everyone would laugh. My uncles would slap the table. My cousins would snicker. Even my siblings would roll their eyes. Mom never defended me. At best, she would sigh, like she knew it was cruel, but still chose silence. They didn't just doubt me, they erased me. The worst was the nickname Dad came up with when I was 12, Private Pretend, because I had this wild, childish dream of joining the military. I'd stand in front of the mirror in my room with a broom as a fake rifle, practicing stances I'd seen in movies. He caught me once and shouted down the hallway, "Look at this, Private Pretend is saving the world with her broomstick." The house erupted in laughter, and I wanted to disappear into the floor. That nickname stuck for years. My brother used it in front of his friends. My aunts would smile sweetly and ask me if Private Pretend had saved the day lately. Every time I tried to talk about my dream seriously, someone would roll their eyes and say, "Come on, Evie, be realistic." But here's the thing, deep down, I wasn't pretending. Every time they mocked me, the dream didn't shrink, it grew sharper, stronger, angrier. And years later, when I stood in front of my entire family in full dress uniform with 4 silver stars glinting on my shoulders, their laughter turned into silence so thick it could cut glass. Yes, 4-star general. The girl they called Private Pretend had climbed to the very top of the ladder they told me I'd never touch. And when the ceremony ended, when the national anthem faded and the air was still, my father looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. His mouth opened, but no words came. For once in his life, he couldn't laugh. That moment was the culmination of a lifetime of scars, doubts, and nights spent whispering promises to myself in the dark. One day, I'll show them. This is the story of how I got there, how betrayal, mockery, and loneliness turned into fuel, how the daughter no one believed in became the woman they could never ignore. And I swear, if even one person reading this has ever been told you're not enough, I need you to hear me. You don't have to believe them. Because sometimes, the only way to silence the laughter is to rise so high that even the people who doubted you are forced to stand at attention. I grew up in a small Midwestern town where almost everyone knew each other's business. My father, let's call him Richard, was the kind of man who carried himself like the world owed him respect. He'd served in the military for a handful of years before an injury forced him out, and even though his career never rose very high, he wore those years like a badge he could flash forever. In his eyes, he was the only one in our family who truly understood toughness, discipline, or sacrifice. My mother, Elaine, was quieter. She tried to soften the edges of his harshness but rarely stood up to him. I used to resent her for it, for letting him get away with tearing me down day after day. But as I grew older, I realized she was more fragile than she let on, always balancing between peacekeeping and exhaustion, never willing to fight battles she thought she couldn't win. Then there were my siblings. My older brother, Ryan, was Dad's pride and joy, strong, athletic, loud, the kind of son my father always bragged about. He played football in high school, earned a scholarship, and even though he never joined the military like Dad wanted, he was still considered the man of the house. To Dad, Ryan could do no wrong. My younger sister, Claire, was the golden child in a different way. Pretty, popular, witty, she was the kind of girl who made friends effortlessly. Teachers adored her, boys followed her, and family gatherings always ended with relatives telling her how bright her future looked. And then there was me, the middle child, the quiet one, the dreamer. I wasn't bad at school, but I wasn't top of my class either. I wasn't athletic. I wasn't outgoing. I wasn't the one people gravitated toward at parties. I was ordinary, invisible, sometimes, and in a family like mine, where attention and approval were currency, invisibility was just another form of failure. I think that's why the military fascinated me so much. It wasn't just about uniforms or medals, it was about order, structure, A place where respect wasn't handed out based on whether you were the loudest voice at the dinner table or the prettiest girl at school. It was earned through sweat, through grit, through resilience. At night, I'd lie in bed and imagine it, standing in formation, marching in sync with others, saluting with pride. I'd imagine a world where I wasn't the awkward, overlooked daughter but someone who commanded presence, someone who mattered. Of course, when I tried to talk about it, my family shut me down. I still remember one dinner when I was 15. We were eating spaghetti, Ryan bragging about his football stats, Claire chattering about a school dance. I finally gathered the courage to say, I think I want to join the military one day. The silence that followed lasted only a second before Dad erupted in laughter. You, he said between gasps, you can't even run a mile without crying. What are you gonna do? Evie, bring the enemy snacks? Write them poems until they surrender? Ryan snorted so hard he almost choked on his food. Claire giggled. Mom sighed, muttering, Richard, under her breath. But she didn't defend me. That was the night Private Pretend was born. From then on, the nickname followed me like a shadow. Every holiday, every gathering, someone found a way to use it. At first, I tried to laugh along, to make it sting less, but inside, it carved deep scars. School wasn't much better. I wasn't bullied, exactly, but I wasn't celebrated either. Teachers liked me enough, but I wasn't exceptional. Friends? I had a few, but they were surface level. No one I trusted with the big things. So when my family mocked me, I had nowhere else to turn. That loneliness turned into a strange kind of fuel. By my late teens, I started running every morning, quietly, before the rest of the house woke up. I bought old military manuals from thrift stores, studying strategy and leadership like secret treasures. I practiced push-ups and sit-ups behind closed doors. No one knew. No one believed in me, so why tell them? But I believed, or at least, I wanted to. Even on nights when Dad's voice echoed in my head, she's too weak, too soft, just playing soldier, something inside whispered back, not forever. I held onto that whisper like a lifeline, because when you're the family disappointment, sometimes the only thing that keeps you going is the hope that one day, you'll prove everyone wrong. And God, I wanted that more than anything. By the time I turned 17, Private Pretend wasn't just a nickname, it was practically my family's favorite pastime. It showed up in the smallest, cruelest ways. If I tried to carry too many grocery bags and dropped one, Ryan would smirk and say, Don't worry, Private Pretend. The enemy will wait while you reorganize your supplies. If I tripped going up the stairs, Claire would giggle. She can't even walk straight. How's she gonna march? Even Dad started writing it in birthday cards, like it was some kind of inside joke that bonded them all together, while I was always the punchline. At first, I thought maybe they didn't realize how deeply it cut me, so one night, I told my mom. We were in the kitchen, just the two of us, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence as I dried dishes. Mom, I said softly, I don't like it when they call me that. It's not funny anymore. She paused, her shoulders tensing, then gave me this tired look. They don't mean harm, Evie. It's just teasing. You know how your father is. But it's not just teasing, I insisted. My throat tightened. It feels like they're saying I'll never be anything. She exhaled slowly, set down the dish towel, and brushed a strand of hair from my face, then proved them wrong. It was the closest thing to support I'd ever get from her. Not comfort, not defense, just a challenge. At school, things weren't much easier. My friends, or the people I thought were my friends, joined in sometimes without realizing how much it hurt. One afternoon, I was at the park with Jess and Marcy, two girls from my history class. We were sprawled on the grass, sipping sodas, when the topic of the future came up. Jess wanted to be a nurse. Marcy dreamed of journalism. What about you, Evie? Jess asked. I hesitated, then said quietly, I want to join the military. Marcy snorted. Seriously? Jess tilted her head, trying not to laugh. I mean, that's cool, but like, don't you have to be, kinda tough? I can be tough, I said quickly, sitting up straighter. Marcy smirked. Sure, Private Pretend. The words hit like a punch to the chest. I stared at her, stunned. What did you just say? She blinked innocently. Ryan told us. He says that's your nickname at home. Cute, right? Jess tried to smooth it over with an awkward laugh, but it was too late. The nickname had escaped the walls of my house, bleeding into the outside world. Now it wasn't just my family who doubted me, it was everyone. I walked home that evening with tears stinging my eyes, every step heavier than the last. I wanted to scream, to fight, to tell them they didn't understand, but the truth was, I wasn't sure I believed in myself either. Because they weren't wrong. At 17, I still struggled to run a mile without gasping for air. I wasn't strong enough to do more than a handful of push-ups. I had no proof that I could actually do this thing I kept swearing I would. And that scared me more than anything. But fear has a strange way of transforming. For some people, it crushes them. For me, it became fuel. That night, I laced up my sneakers and went for a run. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, and I stopped after barely half a mile, but I went back the next night, and the night after that. I started small, push-ups on my bedroom floor, sit-ups before bed, carrying stacks of books up the stairs like weights. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And every time I heard Dad laugh, every time Ryan smirked, every time Claire rolled her eyes or Mom stayed silent, I whispered to myself, one day you'll see. The tension in the house only grew as my resolve hardened. I stopped laughing at their jokes. I started pushing back, even in small ways. When Dad called me private pretend, I stared him down instead of shrinking. When Ryan mocked me, I bit my tongue to keep from snapping, but my silence wasn't weakness anymore, it was fire. Still, the cracks were widening. Every dinner felt like a test I was destined to fail. Every holiday, another performance of let's remind Evie she's worthless. And though I didn't know it yet, those cracks were leading straight to the first big explosion, the moment that would shatter whatever fragile piece we had left. The fight started over something stupid. They usually do. It was Thanksgiving, and the whole extended family had crowded into our house. The kitchen smelled like turkey and cinnamon. Kids were running around. Football blared from the living room. It should have been warm, joyful. Instead, it turned into one of the worst nights of my life. We were all sitting around the long dining table when my uncle raised his glass and said, "So, what's everyone planning for the future, Ryan? You're still going into business, right?" Ryan launched into a confident speech about his college major, how he was going to work in finance and make real money. Everyone applauded like he was already a CEO. Claire followed with her own little performance about journalism school, and once again, the table buzzed with admiration. Then someone turned to me. "And you, Evie, what's next for you?" I hesitated. My stomach knotted. I knew what would happen, but I was so tired of hiding, so I said it, I'm going to enlist. The silence was instant and heavy. Then came the laughter. It started with Ryan, who nearly spit out his drink. Claire giggled, shaking her head like I'd told the funniest joke. Even my aunts and uncles chuckled nervously, as if they weren't sure whether I was serious. And then Dad sealed it. He slapped the table so hard the silverware rattled. "Oh, come on, you, the army, Evie, you couldn't even follow simple chores as a kid. You cried when your bike chain popped. You think you can handle a battlefield?" Laughter exploded around the table again. My face burned hot, my throat closing. "Dad, I'm serious," I said, my voice trembling. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Serious? The only thing you're serious about is pretending." Private pretend strikes again. I felt something inside me snap. "Stop calling me that," I shouted, louder than I'd ever dared before. The room went dead silent. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "I'm not your joke. I'm not some weak, useless kid. I'm going to enlist. And one day I'll outrank every single expectation you ever had for me." The silence stretched. I could hear my heart hammering in my ears. Dad's smirk disappeared, replaced by a hard, cold glare. "Don't raise your voice at me," he said, his tone sharp as a blade. "I will if it means you'll finally listen." I shot back. My hands were shaking under the table, but I didn't care. "I've spent my whole life letting you mock me, letting everyone laugh, and I'm done. You don't get to decide what I'm capable of." Ryan muttered, "Here we go again." rolling his eyes. Claire whispered, "You're embarrassing yourself." But I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes locked on Dad. For the first time, he didn't laugh. He didn't joke. He just stared at me like I was some stranger who'd walked into his house and dared to defy him. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. "If you walk down this path, don't expect me to support you. Don't expect me to be there when you come crawling back after failing. You'll be on your own." The words hit like a punch to the chest, but underneath the sting, a spark lit. "Fine," I whispered, my voice cracked, "but I meant it. I'd rather be on my own than live the rest of my life as your joke." The room erupted in whispers and gasps. Mom reached for my arm, but I pulled away. My chair scraped against the floor as I stood, my legs shaky but moving. I left the table, left the house, left their laughter and disbelief behind. That night, walking alone under the cold November sky, I cried harder than I ever had, but through the tears, I felt something I'd never felt before: freedom. Because for the first time, I hadn't just dreamed of standing up to them, I had. And though I was terrified of what came next, I knew one thing for certain: my war had officially begun. The days after Thanksgiving felt like walking through a storm with no shelter. Dad barely spoke to me. When he did, it was sharp, clipped, and full of venom. "You embarrassed me in front of the whole family," he muttered once while passing me in the hallway, his voice low but cold enough to freeze me in place. Mom tried to keep the peace, but even she couldn't hide her disappointment. "Evie, why do you always have to stir things up?" she asked while folding laundry, shaking her head like I was a child who'd thrown a tantrum instead of a young woman fighting for her future. Ryan, of course, made it his mission to keep mocking me. "Hey, private pretend. Want me to teach you how to shine your boots? Oh wait, you'll probably just cry into them," he'd say with that smug grin. And Claire? She weaponized silence. She'd glance at me, roll her eyes, and whisper with Mom when I entered the room, making sure I felt excluded. It was like living with strangers, except they weren't strangers, they were the people who were supposed to love me, support me, and protect me. At night, I'd sit in my room, staring at the ceiling, my pillow damp from silent tears. 100 doubts ran through my head. What if Dad was right? What if I wasn't strong enough? What if I failed and gave them even more reasons to laugh? But then I'd remember that night at the table, his smirk, his words, the way everyone's laughter had cut through me like knives, and I'd feel the fire again. No, I couldn't let them be right. I wouldn't. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through enlistment requirements on my laptop, when Dad walked in. His eyes narrowed. "Still with this nonsense?" "Yes," I said firmly, closing the screen but keeping my hands on it, like I was shielding it from him. He snorted. "Evie, do you have any idea what you're getting yourself into? You think boot camp is going to be some kind of summer camp? You'll quit within a week, and then what? You'll crawl back here, and I'll be right, again." My chest tightened, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. "You don't know that. You don't know me." His face twisted. "I know exactly who you are. You're the girl who never finishes anything, the girl who hides in her room when life gets hard. You're not soldier material, Evie. You're a joke." The words landed like bullets, each one tearing at me. I wanted to break, to cry, but instead, I stood. My voice trembled, but it came out louder than I expected. "Maybe I was that girl," I said, "but not anymore. You can keep calling me names, keep tearing me down, but one day, you're going to regret underestimating me." He stared at me, shocked that I dared to talk back. For a moment, I almost thought he'd soften, but then his mouth curled into a cruel smile. "Fine, go ahead, ruin your life, but when you fail, don't you dare come crawling back to me. You'll have to live with the shame." I swallowed hard, my throat burning. "When I succeed," I said quietly, "I'll be living with pride, something you'll never understand." His chair screeched as he shoved it back and stormed out of the kitchen. The slam of the door echoed through the house. I sat there shaking, my hands clenched into fists. My whole body ached from holding back tears, but in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. His rejection no longer felt like a chain holding me down, it felt like fuel. That night, I filled out the enlistment paperwork. I hit submit with trembling hands, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like private pretend. I felt like a soldier. The email confirmation sat in my inbox like a bomb waiting to go off. Application received. A recruiter will contact you shortly. My hands shook as I read it over and over, my chest a mixture of fear and adrenaline. I had actually done it. The first to find out was Mom. She walked into my room without knocking, saw the open laptop screen, and froze. Her eyes widened. Evie, what is this? I swallowed. I enlisted. She blinked, as if she hadn't heard me right. You what? I enlisted. I repeated, louder this time, my heart pounding. Her face crumpled, half shock, half anger. No, no, you can't do this. You're not ready. You'll get hurt. Or worse. Mom, I cut in, my voice breaking but firm. I have to do this. I need to prove I can stand on my own. To you, to Dad, to myself. Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head, whispering, "You're making a mistake." Then she turned and left before I could say another word. I sat there, the silence heavy, my hands gripping the sheets. Part of me wanted to chase after her, to explain, to beg for her support, but another part of me, the part that had survived every insult, every laugh, kept whispering, "Stay strong." Ryan was next. He barged into my room later that night, waving his phone. "You really did it? You actually enlisted?" His voice was dripping with mockery. "Yes," I said, refusing to look away from him. He laughed so hard he doubled over, clutching his stomach. "Oh, this is gold. Private Pretend is going to boot camp. You won't last a day, Evie. Not one freaking day." My hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. "We'll see," I whispered, more to myself than to him. Claire didn't laugh. She didn't yell. She just looked at me like I was a stranger. "Why, Evie? Why would you throw your life away like this?" "Because it's my life," I said quietly, "and I'm tired of living it on everyone else's terms." Her eyes softened for just a moment, almost like she understood, but then she turned away. "When you come back broken, don't say we didn't warn you." And then there was Dad. He didn't confront me right away. For 2 days, he barely spoke a word, just cold silence, like I was invisible. Then, one morning, I came downstairs to find him sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. He didn't look at me, just muttered, "So you did it?" "Yes," I said, my voice small but steady. He finally looked up, his eyes hard. "I'll say this once. Don't expect me at your graduation. Don't expect me at your ceremony. If you think this family is going to clap for you while you play soldier, you're dead wrong." The words cut deep, but something in me snapped. I stood taller, my voice rising despite the tremor in it. "I don't need your applause. I don't need your approval, because the army will see what you never did, that I'm stronger than you ever gave me credit for." We locked eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't look away. His lip curled. "We'll see how strong you are when reality hits." I walked away before the tears spilled, but inside, something shifted. His threats no longer felt like shackles, they felt like fuel. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my chest heavy but my spirit unshaken. Yes, I was terrified. Yes, I doubted myself. But beneath all of it, a voice whispered louder than the fear, "You're stronger than they think. You always have been." For the first time, I believed it. The bus ride to base felt like being carried away from my old life. My duffel bag dug into my side, and the chatter of strangers around me was a low hum in the background. My stomach twisted with nerves, but under it all was a quiet, steady pulse. This is it. No turning back. When we arrived, the air hit me first, sharp, cold, and full of dust. The drill sergeants were already waiting, their voices booming like thunder. "Move, move, move," they barked as we scrambled off the bus. I swear my legs almost gave out before we even reached the barracks. That first night, I lay on the hard mattress, my body aching and my mind racing. Everyone else looked as nervous as I felt, but I couldn't stop thinking about Dad. His words echoed in my head, "You'll quit within a week." The next morning, I learned he might have been right. The drill sergeants tore into us like wolves. Push-ups, sit-ups, sprints, again and again until my arms shook and my lungs burned. Sweat dripped into my eyes. My chest felt like it was splitting open, and every time I thought I couldn't keep going, the same thought slammed into me: if I quit, he wins. By the end of the day, I was trembling so badly I could barely lift my water bottle. My bunkmate, a tall girl named Harris, glanced at me and said, "First day's always hell. You'll get used to it." I wanted to laugh. Used to it? My body felt like it was breaking apart. But when I closed my eyes that night, I remembered Ryan's laughter, Claire's eye rolls, Dad's smirk. Rage flared inside me, giving me just enough strength to whisper to myself, "Don't give them the satisfaction." The days blurred together after that. We woke before dawn, ran until our legs were numb, crawled through mud, fired rifles until our shoulders bruised. I failed more often than I succeeded at first. I lagged behind on runs, stumbled over drills, earned extra laps for mistakes. And the drill sergeants never let me forget it. "Carter, are you trying to dig a hole with your face?" one bellowed as I collapsed during push-ups. "Pathetic. Get up or get out." Every insult felt like fuel, every failure burned, but it hardened me. Then came the obstacle course. The rope climb was my personal nightmare. I'd never had upper body strength, and halfway up, my arms gave out, my body dangled, legs kicking helplessly. I could already hear Ryan's voice in my head, laughing. "Told you. Weak." The drill sergeant shouted, "Fall and you're done, Carter." Something in me snapped. I bit down hard, my hands screaming from the rope burn. My muscles shook, but I forced myself upward, inch by inch. Every pull felt like ripping fire through my arms, but I climbed higher, higher, until finally, my hand slapped the top beam. The roar of triumph in my chest was louder than anything I'd ever felt. I slid back down, panting, bruised, and half dead, but I hadn't quit. That night, Harris grinned at me. "Didn't think you had it in you, Carter." I laughed weakly, clutching my sore arms. Neither did I. For the first time, I started to believe maybe I did belong here. Boot camp didn't get easier, but I got stronger. Each day, I lasted a little longer. Each week, I stumbled less, held my head higher. And every time doubt crept in, I whispered the same thing to myself: "You are not their joke anymore." I wasn't just surviving. I was becoming. By the third week of boot camp, my body had stopped screaming quite so loudly. The blisters on my feet turned into calluses. The soreness in my arms dulled into something like strength. But the real change wasn't just in my muscles, it was in my mind. I wasn't the same Evie who had walked off that bus terrified and small. I was starting to believe I belonged here. And then came the day everything shifted. We were assigned a team drill: move a heavy crate across a muddy field using only ropes and coordination. It wasn't about strength, it was about working together. But my group was falling apart. Harris and another recruit were screaming at each other. 2 others just stood frozen, and the crate wasn't moving an inch. The drill sergeant barked at us, "Clock's ticking. You'll all run laps until your legs fall off if that crate isn't across the line." Panic buzzed through me, but underneath it, I felt something stronger: clarity. I could hear my dad's voice in my head, "You can't even follow orders," and something inside me burned. "Stop!" I shouted, louder than I thought I could. Everyone turned, stunned. My chest was pounding, but I forced the words out. "We're wasting time. Harris, take the left rope. Johnson, right side. Perez, help me anchor. On my count, 3, 2, 1, pull." To my surprise, they listened. The crate lurched forward, slow but steady. We reset, pulled again, then again. Mud splashed. Our arms shook, but suddenly the crate crossed the line. The drill sergeant blew his whistle, squinting at me. "Carter," he barked. What the hell was that? My stomach dropped. Was I in trouble? But then, he nodded. Just once. Not bad. Not bad. 2 words that sent electricity through my veins. After that, something changed with my unit. Harris clapped me on the shoulder later, grinning. "Didn't think you had lungs like that, Carter." For the first time, the nickname Private Pretend didn't haunt me. Because here, In this place, I wasn't a joke. I was part of something bigger. And it wasn't just about shouting commands. Boot camp taught me things I never expected. Like the long nights when we huddled in our bunks, whispering about home, fear, and dreams. I learned that the girl who always seemed confident had joined because her dad was in prison. The guy who could run circles around all of us cried himself to sleep sometimes because he missed his little sister. We were all broken in some way, but together, we were learning how to turn those cracks into strength. The hardest test came during a night exercise. We had to navigate through thick woods in the dark. No flashlights, just compasses and each other. At one point, someone tripped, sprained their ankle, and panic rippled through the group. The clock was ticking, the sergeant's voice booming in the distance. You fail. You restart. Everyone froze, unsure what to do. And then, before I could second-guess myself, I stepped up. Pair up. We'll carry him, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. We're finishing together. We did, limping, sweating, nearly collapsing by the end, but we finished. When the sergeant checked us in, his eyes landed on me again. Carter, he said slowly, looks like you're not as useless as you look. It wasn't much, but from him, it was everything. That night, lying on my bunk, I thought about my family. I imagined Ryan laughing, Dad smirking, Claire rolling her eyes, and for the first time, their voices didn't sting the same way. Because here, surrounded by people who saw me fight, struggle, and lead, I wasn't their joke anymore. I was a soldier. Graduation day arrived with the crisp bite of early morning air. Rows of us stood in formation, boots polished to a mirror shine, uniforms stiff and perfect. The flag rippled against the sky. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't just wearing strength, I was living it. My chest swelled with pride as the cadence echoed across the field, the rhythmic stomp of boots beating like a war drum. I wasn't the same girl who had once cried in her room, drowning in doubt. I was leaner, sharper, stronger. I had earned this uniform with every blister, bruise, and tear. But as I scanned the bleachers, that pride tangled with something darker. Families lined the seats, waving and cheering. Moms clapped with tears streaming down their cheeks. Dads stood, chests puffed out, beaming with pride. Siblings held up handmade signs. The air vibrated with celebration. My eyes searched desperately, even though I knew better. No Mom. No Ryan. No Claire. And of course, no Dad. The empty space where they should have been was louder than the cheers around me. Eyes forward, Carter, a sergeant snapped, pulling me back. I snapped my head straight, jaw tight, but inside, the hollow ache grew. When the ceremony ended, and the drill sergeant called my name, I marched forward to receive my certificate. My hands didn't shake, my chin didn't lower. I saluted sharp and clean. Good work, Carter, he said gruffly. 2 words, simple and clipped, but they hit harder than any insult my father had ever thrown at me. As I stood at attention, I realized something. This was the moment I had dreamed of, the moment I wanted Dad to see, the moment I thought would finally silence his mockery, and he wasn't there. He chose not to be. And yet, my chest still swelled with pride. Because this wasn't about him anymore. When the ceremony ended, Harris ran up and smacked me on the back. We made it, Carter, she grinned, her eyes bright. I laughed, and for the first time in years, it felt real. Yeah, we did. That night, in the barracks, as everyone packed their things to head off to new assignments, I sat on my bunk and wrote a letter home. My hand hovered over the paper for a long time before I finally let the words spill out. Dear Dad, I graduated today. You weren't there, but I didn't need you to be. I thought this moment would be about proving you wrong, but it's not. It's about proving myself right. I didn't know if I'd ever send it, but writing it was enough. I folded the letter, tucked it into my bag, and stared at my reflection in the small metal mirror above my bunk. The girl staring back wasn't weak. She wasn't a joke. She was a soldier. And her war was just beginning. Years passed, years of deployments, promotions, sleepless nights, and battlefields, both literal and personal. I didn't rise easily. Nothing was handed to me. I bled for every stripe, sacrificed for every star, and every time I thought of quitting, I remembered Dad's voice, "You'll never make it." And so, one day, I did the unthinkable. I pinned on my fourth star, General Evelyn Carter. Even now, writing those words feels unreal. The ceremony was surreal, rows of uniforms, brass glinting under the lights, flags draped with reverence. The air smelled faintly of polish and paper, the kind of sterile mix that always seemed to cling to military halls. My chest ached with pride as the commanding officer saluted me, his voice firm, "Congratulations, General Carter." But the moment that burned itself into memory wasn't that salute. It was what came after. Because against every bitter promise he made, Dad showed up. I spotted him in the back, dressed in the same old leather jacket he'd worn for decades. He looked older, smaller somehow, but his eyes, those sharp, judgmental eyes, were locked on me. For a heartbeat, the room blurred. Suddenly I was a little girl again, clutching my bike handles while he smirked. "You can't even follow simple orders." Suddenly I was standing at that Thanksgiving table, the sound of laughter crushing me. And then I remembered who I was now. Not their joke, not their disappointment. A four-star general. The commanding officer's words rang out across the hall, "Ladies and gentlemen, salute your general." As dozens of hands snapped to brows, my father froze, his mouth parted slightly, his eyes wide. For once, there was no smirk, no cruel word waiting, just silence. And then, slowly, almost reluctantly, his hand lifted. He saluted me. The man who never once believed in me, the man who mocked me, dismissed me, tore me down my entire life, stood there in stunned silence, his hand trembling as he saluted his daughter. I held his gaze, my own salute sharp and steady, my chest swelled with something deeper than pride. It wasn't victory over him. It was victory over every doubt, every cruel word, every piece of me that once believed I wasn't enough. After the ceremony, people swarmed me, officers, peers, even strangers, shaking my hand, congratulating me. I smiled, thanked them, but my eyes kept flicking back to Dad. Eventually, he approached, moving slowly, almost cautiously. He stopped a few feet away, his face unreadable. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Evie." General Carter. Hearing him say it almost knocked the breath from me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he whispered, "I was wrong." The words were raw, jagged, like they tore him on the way out. His eyes glistened, and for once, he looked less like the towering critic of my childhood and more like an old man realizing the world had left him behind. I swallowed hard, emotions storming inside me, anger, sadness, relief, but above all, peace. "I know," I said softly, "but I don't need your apology anymore." His lips parted, like he wanted to argue, but then he just nodded, almost in surrender. We stood in silence, two people connected by blood but divided by years of pain, and in that silence, I felt the final chain break. I no longer needed his approval. Because I had found something stronger. Myself. When I finally got home that night, after the ceremony, the crowd, the cameras, the endless handshakes, I stood alone in my kitchen with my uniform still on, four stars on my shoulders, heavy yet lighter than all the years of doubt I had carried. I poured myself a glass of water, set it on the counter, and let myself breathe. That's when it hit me, the moment wasn't about my father's salute. It wasn't about proving him wrong, though God knows that felt satisfying. It was about proving myself right. All those nights when I cried into my pillow, thinking I wasn't good enough. All those times when I almost believed his voice more than my own. All the failures, the grueling training, the mistakes that nearly broke me, those weren't wasted. They were building me into the woman I am now. I used to think I needed my dad's approval to matter, to be worth anything. But standing there, stars glinting faintly in the dim light of my kitchen, I realized the truth. I never needed his validation. I needed my own courage. For years, I let his mockery define me. For years, I carried shame that wasn't mine to carry, but the moment I stopped chasing his approval was the moment I started winning, not just in the military, but in life. When he saluted me, I didn't feel like I finally earned his respect. I felt like he finally saw what was always there. And if you're reading this, if you've ever been belittled, doubted, or told you're not enough, let me tell you something I wish I had believed sooner: their voices don't define you. Your worth isn't measured by their approval. It's measured by your resilience, your integrity, your fire to keep moving even when everyone laughs in your face. The moral of my story? Sometimes, the people closest to us will be the loudest in tearing us down, but their doubt doesn't limit our destiny, it only sharpens it, if we let it. Prove yourself for you, not for them. And one day, when the very people who mocked you are forced to stand in stunned silence, you'll realize the real victory isn't their respect. It's the unshakable belief that you didn't need it in the first place.